Hello, this is Salvatore Vinciguerra, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you the Roaring Fork driving tour in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park near Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Please enjoy this video. The Roaring Fork Motor Nature Trail is one of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park's secrets. I've been to the Great Smoky Mountains many times in my life, and I've never stumbled across this particular trail. I actually had to have somebody tell me where it was and look at a map to find out how to get there from Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And there are actually some hidden roads, and then you finally stumble across this road that leads you to the motor trail. And sometimes you don't even know that you're on the Roaring Fork Motor Trail, except that you will see a sign that says the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and then you'll see your first stop, which is the Noah Bud Ogle Farmstead. And if you've made it there, then you're on the Roaring Fork Motor Trail. My original intention for visiting the Roaring Fork Motor Nature Trail was to either visit Rainbow Falls or Grotto Falls. However, the first day that I decided to drive this trail, it was kind of midday, and it was very busy, especially here in the summer, so there was no parking for either Rainbow Falls or Grotto Falls, and I just had to continue along the trail. If you are deciding to go hiking along any of these trails, I highly suggest to be an early riser, so that way you can get a good parking spot so you don't have to add maybe an additional half of a mile to your already 2 or 3 mile hiking trail. As you can see, they do have little buggies that you can rent in the Gatlinburg area, and people do use regular cars on this particular motor trail. It's not intended for people to bring their large 30 or 40 foot motorhome or RV or any type of large vehicle. So that is just a warning to you that some of this trail can be narrow, especially if you're driving next to some of these cars that are parked, and also parts of it are very steep. Some unexpected things that you're going to find on this particular trail is you're going to be surrounded by waterfalls, and you're even going to drive past one that's right alongside of the road. Later in the video, you're actually going to see my hike to Grotto Falls, which I found it to be an exceptional fall, and most probably one of the better falls that you can see here in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And another thing that people will come up to you in this particular area as you're just minding your own business, taking pictures, is, have you seen anything? And I would kind of be wondering, well, what am I supposed to be looking for in this area? And believe it or not, this is one of the better places that you can see bears walking around the park, even a mama bear and a couple of cubs. So be very vigilant that these animals are out there. I haven't heard of anything happening in this particular area of the park with the bears where they have done anything bad. I have heard of in other parts of the park that the bears have gotten a little rowdy and done some bad things. So please watch out, even though you are just minding your own business and taking pictures, and you want to take pictures of some of these bears, just please be very cautious that these animals are wild and they're just doing what they're supposed to do in nature to defend themselves or even their cubs. This is the Noah Bud Ogle Farm, and this is the first stop on the Roaring Fork Motor Trail. It is a self-guided trail where you just walk through different areas of this, and it's about 3/4 of a mile round trip. If you want to do the little loop, it's about 30 minutes, and it's a very easy walk, nothing steep. You're either walking around the farmhouse, and then there's another trail that leads you in the backwoods, which you may see a couple of animals back there. This video is taken during the summer, so everything is nice and green, as you can see in the foliage. But I can imagine that different parts of the year, especially during autumn, the trees would change colors. And also there would be water in different areas of these hiking trails. So just keep in mind as you're traveling through here that at different times of the year you're going to have different experiences. And also I would imagine that during the winter that they would actually close this particular motor trail off, as snow may impede some of the roadways and you wouldn't be able to go through the entire trail, as there's one way in and only one way out. As you're traveling through the hiking trail, I always wonder, well, what were these first settlers like? With axe, plow, and gun, the first settlers changed the mountains, cutting into the forests that were centuries old. They called this place Jungle Brook, after the dense growths of rhododendron and magnolia that bordered the streams. Between 1883 and 1925, this was the farm of Noah Bud Ogle, but the forest is reclaiming it. On this particular trail, as I'm sharing with you, this is the cabin. Then there were cornfields here and a mill which was long abandoned on this farmstead. A lesser known fact about this particular area and William Ogle and his family is that sometimes William Ogle gets credited for building the first home in the area and being the first settler in this particular area of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. However, it was his wife Martha Jane Husky Ogle who first moved here. Understanding the history and culture of the Great Smoky Mountains is very interesting, and you have to understand that one of the reasons why President Roosevelt tried to preserve the Smoky Mountains was because there was a large logging industry that was destroying the ecosystem here in the Smoky Mountains. Fortunately or unfortunately, the United States government took these lands that were owned by these people and they paid out the different families that lived here, their large communities, and they wanted to preserve the area, and so they had to move these families and their homesteads and their farms to other parts. And at the end of the video, I'm going to be sharing with you something very interesting, because this Roaring Fork Motor Trail ends up on somebody's private property, and people still own areas around the national park and have some very interesting histories that go into the preservation and conservation of a national park, but also the controversy of taking people's properties and their livelihood away from them. And did the United States government really pay well for some of these properties, and were people able to really go to other places in this area and do the same thing, especially in the farming industry? Not necessarily the logging industry, but the people that actually lived here in the community and sustained life off of these various areas, and especially were the first settlers of the area, as was the case in the Ogle family. This is the history of the Smokies according to the Great Smoky Mountain Association, and it's a great organization that I'll put a link to in the description box below. What the Great Smoky Mountain Association does is they actually help fund some of the things that the National Park Association cannot do, and it's a great organization, and you're going to see them at some of the different visitor areas that they have at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The Great Smoky Mountains are among the oldest mountains on Earth. Their rich biodiversity is a remnant of the last ice age, when glaciers stopped their southward advance short of the Great Smokies, setting up a treasury of living things that would continue to diversify for thousands of years. Humans have occupied this mountain since prehistoric times, adapting to changes in climate and environment. Hunters and gatherers passed through here over 12,000 years ago. More permanent communities developed during the woodland period, 3,000 to 1,000 years ago. By the time European American settlers arrived in the region in the 1700s, they found themselves in the land of one of the most culturally advanced tribes on the continent, the Cherokee. The Great Smoky Mountains lie in the midst of the Cherokee homeland, where they nurtured complex systems of agricultural, government, and trade during more than 1,000 years of habitation. They had a deep knowledge of this land, its plants, and animals. By the 1830s, the Cherokee had adopted new methods of agriculture and architecture from white settlers and developed a new system of written language. Nevertheless, they suffered one of the most tragic episodes in our nation's history, forced removal from their homeland in what became known as the Trail of Tears. The few who remained or managed to return are the ancestors of the Cherokee living on the reservation near the park today. White settlers came to the Smokies in the 1700s seeking the opportunity to build a new life. Wrestling from the forest farms, homes, and communities, they built log cabins and lived off land, farmed, hunted, and pastured livestock, and took advantage of the rich resources of the forest that surrounded them. Churches were the centers of their communities. Education was valued, and schools could be found in communities throughout the mountains. Though their early lives in the wild were primitive, by the 1900s there was little difference between mountain people and their contemporaries living in rural areas beyond the mountains. The agricultural pattern of the Great Smoky Mountains changed with the arrival of the logging industry in the 1900s. Within 20 years, the largely self-sufficient economy of the people here was almost entirely replaced by the dependence on manufactured items, store-bought food and cash. Logging boom towns sprang up overnight at sites that still bear the names Elkmont, Smokemont, Proctor, Tremont. At the same time, loggers are rapidly cutting the great primeval forests that remained on the mountains. Unless the course of events could be quickly changed, there would be little left of the region's special character and wilderness resources. Intervention came when the Great Smoky Mountains National Park was established in 1934. The forest, at least 20% or so that remained uncut within park boundaries, was saved. Over time, the people, more than 1,200 landowners, left the park. Behind them remained many farm buildings, mills, schools, and churches. Over 70 of these structures have since been maintained so that the Great Smoky Mountains National Park preserves the largest collection of historic log buildings in the East. In the Great Smoky Mountains, history is as deep as the sheltered covers and valleys where farms and families once thrived. It passes beyond recorded history to the earliest groups who made their way through this wilderness, and it owes much of its distant history when these islands of green survived the Ice Age and produced a diverse abundance of life capable of supporting eventual settlements by humans. The story of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park is the story of people and their homes, now preserved and protected for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. The story that continues to be written. As you can see, this is my hike to Grotto Falls, and I took the trailhead from the Roaring Fork Motor Trail, and if you want to have a parking space, you have to get there really early in the morning, or make sure that you're getting there at a time where maybe the trailhead isn't being used. I believe that the National Park Service is actually doing some sort of reservation system to make sure that they have happy campers in the park system. Please make sure that you visit the National Park Service website and make sure that this hiking trail is going to be available at the time of the year that you're going to be visiting. As I do know in the winter time, I believe it's in December through maybe March that they close the Roaring Fork Motor Trail, and so this part of the park is not available to most people. As you can see, the Trillium Gap Trailhead also has access to Rainbow Falls, and also Mount LeConte. So on Tuesdays, I believe that somebody told me that you can actually see the llamas hike up all of the supplies to Mount LeConte, as this may be an easier way to get up there from some other places that you can. And in another video, I'm going to be sharing with you some other hiking trail that you could take up to Mount LeConte. And Mount LeConte is actually one of the highest peaks in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The hike to Grotto Falls is about 2.6 miles. And keep in mind, this can take you about 2 hours to go out and about 2 to 3 hours to come back in. What I did this particular morning was wake up early, get a good parking spot, kind of, it really wasn't, and then I walked early in the morning, had my lunch at Grotto Falls, enjoyed the falls during lunch, took a break, and then walked back, and then finished out driving again through the Motorfolk Trail, which I'm always looking for wildlife, and I love looking at the various aspects of the Smoky Mountains from this particular trail. Now, what I am impressed with is that this is a pretty light hike. Even though it's a long hike, it's a pretty light hike, and it is easier to do than some of the other hikes that I've done in the Great Smoky Mountains. As you can see in some of the video, there are families here. This is a wonderful place for children. It's a good summer activity. There's plenty of water to keep you cool. You're hiking about 585 feet from the bottom of the trailhead to Grotto Falls. So as you're going higher in elevation, you're also going to feel cooler air, and you're going to be surrounded when you get there by beautiful waterfall. Even though this trail is very well maintained, I would highly suggest that you bring hiking boots or hiking shoes and a walking stick. And it's just that I feel that those things will help stabilize you as you're taking this hike and you're going higher in elevation with the different terrain that you're going to be encountering. And as you can see, that there's a lot of water on this particular trail. There are falls everywhere as you're walking, and it's a very nice experience. And take your time and just sit underneath a tree if you get tired and enjoy some of the wildlife. Look very carefully on either side of the trailhead, but don't fall down the trailhead as you're looking. But there are all kinds of microenvironments that include all kinds of plants and animals. At different times of the year, of course, you're going to see different flowers in bloom. As I just shared with you, a late blooming rhododendron, and if you come in June or July, you're going to see a lot of those different flowers in bloom. But here in July, this is very green, and not too much is going to be in bloom. The Trillium Gap Trail will have hemlock trees and a variety of wildflowers. You'll see both yellow and white-tailed trillium, from which the trail takes its name, as well as snowy white violets and delicate blooms of stitchwork. One of the hiking trail blogs says that you should be looking for white blooms that resemble men's pants hanging by their cuffs from a clothesline, and the flowers are called Dutchman's breeches, and it can be found along this trail. The wildflowers that I just mentioned are very vibrant and colorful in the month of May, which is late spring in this particular part of the Great Smoky Mountains. You should take some caution as you're trying to cross the 4 different streams on this particular trail, and this is what it looks like. You're going to have rocks, you're going to have flowing water, it's going to be very slippery and very uneven. So take your time as you're going across this, make sure that you're making the right moves and that you're not going to be falling inside of the stream, and if you do on a hot summer day, then so what? You should make it to the other side of the stream without any problems. I would highly advise that you listen as you're walking down this trail and look across, but don't fall down the mountain as you're trying to look across, because if you look very carefully in this particular picture, all the way on the other side of the trail, you can see a little waterfall there. So you're going to see all kinds of neat waterfalls and streams as you're hiking up to Grotto Falls. As you can see, this is a very neat waterfall. It's about 25 feet high and there's plenty of rhododendron, so I can't imagine at different times of the year where you'd actually get to see some of those different types of blooms in addition to the waterfall. The coolest thing about it is I think this is the only waterfall in the Great Smoky Mountains where you can actually walk underneath it, and there are pools of water and people are just taking their time relaxing when they get there and just taking a break. Now from this particular area you can go ahead and continue your hike to Mount LeConte, which make sure that you're ready for that ascent up there if you're ready to do that. I don't know how many hours it is to continue on that particular trail, but even if you just hiked a little bit more, that they do have some other opportunities to see views of the Great Smoky Mountains, maybe another mile or two. But in order to get to Mount LeConte, I'm sure it's another couple of hours, and you need to make sure that you have provisions, and most people go up there and they spend the night. So that's a whole nother activity for another time. Another thing that you should be aware of if you're walking along either this hiking trail or even going to continue your journey to Mount LeConte is that they do have active black bears upon this route. So make sure that you're also prepared for that and you're walking and you're being very careful as to your surroundings. As you can see, this waterfall brings about a lot of photo opportunities, not only for yourself, but for other people. And you know what? If you can't hold the camera and take the photo, then give it to someone who's right there. The people in this area are so friendly and they'll be happy to take your picture for you. This is such an amazing place for photo opportunities and one of the highlights of my visits to the Great Smoky Mountains this past summer. Here's something that I bet you didn't know about the Great Smoky Mountains is that it's known as the salamander capital of the world. If it wasn't for a little family traveling in front of me on my hike, stopping over and taking a look at this microscopic little worm coming out of a hole on the side of the trail, I wouldn't have had this opportunity to have somebody show me what a salamander looks like, and this is where they live. And actually, they live on the sides of these wet little rocks and stuff that you can see on the sides of trails. So make sure that you travel slowly, and when you come to some of these different crossings or rocks with some moisture on it, look very carefully as you're going to find some of these salamanders. There are 5 families of salamanders represented in the park. and I highly suggest that you check out the National Park website, as I find it very interesting to find out that there are some of these amphibians living in the Appalachian Mountains. So a great way to take a break as you're hiking up and down the mountain is to actually look on the left and the right side of the hiking trail, and you're going to see a variety of different environments that these plants and animals can live in. This video shares with you the descent down from Grotto Falls, and you can see that you are going to be going a little bit faster than you were as you were walking up, as it is easier actually to hike down than it is to start climbing 585 feet. But be careful that you're not going to be losing your footing, as there are some tricky areas when you're walking across some of these streams. Now I've gotten in my car and driven a few miles down the road to the Alfred Reagan house and tub mill, and I'll share that with you in just a second. Even though I filmed all of that first, when I came out from filming, this is what I found. I found a crowd of people watching something up a mountain, and actually this is what we saw. We saw some bears and maybe a bear and some cubs trying to go back up the mountain, and it is kind of exciting because this is the only place that I have seen a bear walk in the Smoky Mountains, and they were really close to us, and people need to be very careful, as these bears were in the area that I was filming with the stream which comes after this, and they most probably were just wanting to get a drink of water out of the stream and then go back in there, or people were saying they were even sniffing what was in our car, so they smelled some of what was in our car, because a lot of people bring their families into this particular area and they have lunch and then they get in their cars and then they drive on. So there are many different reasons why the bears would come out during the day like this, and you do need to be aware that they are there in case one of these bears approaches you, and you need to know what to do. So make sure that you're reading up on this. Everybody thinks that seeing these bears is the coolest thing in the world, and it is, but you also need to be careful, because what if you do encounter one of these bears face to face and it's a mama and her cubs? So be very careful even though these bears are around you. The tub mill is absolutely beautiful to watch with the water running through it, but can you imagine it during its day and the purpose that it had, taking corn, which was a crop that they would grow here in the Smoky Mountains, and crushing it into all different kinds of different course meals that they could use to make food. Here's some information from an interview from one of the people that lived in this area, Herb Clabo, in 1969. It's taken from one of the historic documents from the National Park Service. As did with most mountain farmers, Reagan ranged cattle, hogs, and a few sheep on his land. At various times he used horses, oxen, and mules as work animals. The land supported small numbers of apple, peach, pear, and plum trees, and grapevines. The most common apple was the Winter John, and the grapes were the Blue Concords. Can you imagine what this house would have looked like in its day, when Reagan's wife and his children added color to the front grounds by having a vegetable and herb garden grown there, and of course many flower beds containing zinnias, marigolds, touch-me-nots, lilacs, violets, and just a regular run of flowers were all located around the house and in the immediate area. Perhaps Reagan found the forest that grew on the land and the stream that flowed through it to be nearly as valuable as the land itself. He sold his timber to Andy Huff, who cut and milled it in the 1920s. As I'm walking through the house, I often wonder what kind of furniture would have been placed in each one of these rooms. What would have been of value to the Reagan family? Historical documents indicate that the Ogle family actually owned this before the Reagan family, and it was a log cabin, and then the Reagan family then turned it into what you see here today, and they covered up some of the logs and made it into a more sustainable living structure. Here's a direct quote from Herb Clabo about the house. "It was the finest of house. They told me if the wind came through hard enough, why the house would roll, by it being a log house boxed." And what he meant by that is, you can see the construction. This was a log house, and then they took other materials and they wrapped it to make it more secure. I think that by exploring the Ephraim Bales house gives you more of a perspective as to what the Reagan house would have looked like in its original state. So before I give you a tour of Ephraim Bales' place, I'm going to share with you what you hear in the background, all of this water and this beautiful stream, which I would also say that it is definitely more valuable than the actual farming land that they have here in the woods itself. But can you imagine trying to do some farming around these large, big boulders and rocks all over the place, and can you imagine the soil that's underneath this and what you could grow here? These are only some of the wooden structures that exist today, but there would have been others on the farm. You would have seen animals and all different kinds of things, and this is just basically what the barn looks like, and this is the inside of it. This is the hog pen, and can you imagine the different pigs that would have lived in this little hut? You know, would you see the pigs walking over to the stream and having a drink, or would there be a little fence that would surround this little pen here? Would there be other pens and structures that would house chickens? Would there be a chicken house? What other animals would you find on a farm in the Great Smoky Mountains? As you can see, you're walking up the stream and then you see the stone wall and then you see a road. And yes, this was one of the original roads that would have led you to the Bales house. And when you're looking at the house, make sure that you understand that there's a big structure and then there's a small little structure. The little structure attached to the house would have been the kitchen area. And then I want you to also look around the house and imagine different gardens. As I mentioned before with the Reagan place, there would have been some gardens here. And then the little structure that you can see over there is called the corn crib, and that's where they would have stored the corn and then brought it over to the mill. So can you imagine if you looked at the various areas surrounding the house, that is where they would have grown the corn and had vegetable gardens and all types of other gardens, like I mentioned for the Reagan place. It would have just been something typical that they would have done in this area. After looking at some of the insides of this cabin, can you imagine Ephraim and Minerva Bales raising 9 children here? This was their world. Imagine yourself and 10 others living in this small cabin. Ephraim Bales owned 72 acres. He farmed 30. The rest remained wooded. And this was like many farms along the Roaring Fork area where families scratched a hard living from a very rocky land. After driving a little bit down the road, you can see this waterfall from your car. You don't really have to get out. You may even hear my car running in the background and some people running up to it. There may be 1 or 2 parking spots in this area, but definitely be careful. Slow down your car. I bet others are going to be slow driving through this area, and take a good look at how this waterfall just goes alongside of the road, and it's one of the many water features that you're going to see on the Roaring Fork Motor Trail. Finally, the last stop on the Roaring Fork Motor Trail for you should be Ellie's Mill. Ellie's Mill was built in 1925 by Andrew Jefferson Ellie, and this is a great place to stop at the end of your trip. If there aren't any parking spaces in this particular area, then make one on the side of the road, as this is a great opportunity for children of all ages to go and see the mill and the historic structures that they built here. There's some beautiful grounds where they have weddings. There's also bathroom facilities, which is a rarity on the Roaring Fork Motor Trail. And don't forget to visit the gift shop, which has all kinds of arts and crafts. I know that for me, that this was like shopping for Christmas in July, as they had a variety of very unique Christmas ornaments and other crafts that can only be found in this area and made by the people in the Great Smoky Mountains. There's a reason why you shouldn't enter this part of Ellie's Mill, and that's because there's a beehive all the way in the back of this area, and they're growing their own bees and they're harvesting their own honey so that they can sell it in the gift store. This place is very unique with all the arts and crafts all over the grounds, and if you look very carefully, you can see that they're preparing for a wedding later this afternoon, and I think that that's wonderful to have your wedding right here in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Now they also have cabin rentals, so check out their website, as Ellie's Mill seems to be a very interesting place where you can spend actually a couple of days here. This is Salvatore Vinciguerra. Thank you for watching this video of the Roaring Fork driving tour in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park near Gatlinburg, Tennessee. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to this channel, and have a great day. Thank you.